Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Bia, and this video is going to be different from the ones I have put out because this is less research heavy and more of me talking about my personal observations, how it ties to my individual experiences and the collective. And this is the perfect format for it. This photo booth aesthetic inspired by users Studio Karo and Mickey Galvin. Please check them out if you haven't already. I love their content. Going back, there are two reasons why I want to talk about it. First is this TikTok that I found that confirmed the shift that's happening in me.
I hate to be the one to break it to you, and I know that TikTok therapy has tried to convince you otherwise, but you and we do actually owe people a lot. I don't know where this narrative of you don't owe anyone anything, think of yourself first, etc., genuinely came from. Well, that's a lie. I think I get the sentiment. You have to look after yourself too. But somewhere along the way, I think we've lost the true essence of this saying. I think it's wild that we live in a time where we genuinely believe that we don't owe anyone anything. Time to hang out, a text back, an explanation to something, some sort of understanding. It's so wild to me that this is actually a common saying in our society. Growing up, I remember seeing my parents' friends over all the time. Anytime they needed anything, they were calling their friends. And it's really interesting living in a city like London because I do have community and I do have a real sense of that. But as a whole, I feel like that's not the commonplace thing. And I'm going to be so real, I don't think it's even exclusive to London. I think it's something in our generation. And part of the reason that I think things like run clubs and social clubs are becoming so popular again is because people are tired of doing life alone, and rightly so. Like, this is not what we were designed for. Even thinking primarily, it does not make sense for us to be alone, and that's still true today to modern day society. We do owe each other a lot, and I think our generation, our age group, would be in a much better position if we understood really the true essence of community.
And second is because I want to unpack where the I don't owe anyone anything mindset came from. I want to know the psychological, the cultural, and the societal layers of that mindset. And after I have gathered that, I hope to inspire you to choose to be more community oriented and to be okay with depending on others. Because yes, isolation can be transformative, but being in a collective where you are seen, supported, and loved will make you reach more heights than isolation ever could. I also want to share that there is so much joy and purpose in knowing that your community has poured so much to you. You have no choice but to return the overflow back. As I was tracing the origin of how we got into this you don't owe anyone anything mindset, I first thought of the rise of mental health thought leaders and clinicians on different social media platforms in the past few years. I think this started in 2019. And after the pandemic, more and more psychologists have shown visibility in different social media platforms. And I love that personally. I love learning from these thought leaders. I have learned so much about myself because of these thought leaders. It is through these posts that I got curious about myself and started to do mental health practices. However, there can also be downsides to the accessibility of this information. Psychological concepts are very complex, and it's really hard to capture the essence of something in a 5 to 10 page carousel or a 90-second video. So it can really lead to misinterpretation, and the message may land to us in a harmful way, or it can land to us as this black and white thinking that what we see online is the right way to go about things without thinking of different nuances like culture, resources, and other socioeconomic factors. And these are just some of the messages that I see that kind of stuck with a lot of people, including myself, and I didn't even realize that I was internalizing them already. For example, if someone hurt you, you just cut them off immediately. If you're feeling drained, just set a boundary, which means just stop engaging altogether without even communicating properly. Or if someone needs you, that's a waste of your mental space and their problem is not your responsibility. And again, I agree, boundaries are very important. Even I advocate for my boundaries and I try to be equally mindful of the boundaries of others. But what I find concerning is one, the lack of nuance, and two, because of this black and white thinking, we have find it difficult or inconvenient to really engage in conversation to make our relationships work. Because we are exposed to this messages on boundaries, we just stop communicating altogether and stop people giving a chance to explain themselves or to explain their sides, right? And that can cause isolation. This whole protect your peace thing has turned into never let anyone challenge you, inconvenience you, or depend on you. And that's sad. And even I personally fell for that too. And that's okay. Like, we can't do anything about that anymore. What we can do is dig deep, ask ourselves why we have that mindset so we can change moving forward. Another thing that I also want to discuss is the cultural layer of this topic, which I think is a bit underexplored. I grew up in a collectivist culture. And in a collectivist culture, it's so important to have a sense of community, and there is an element of interdependence that a collective culture must have. And even if we are exposed to a lot of individualistic ideologies, that collective psyche is really embedded in us in some ways because of how our ancestors used community to thrive and to survive. Caring for others and doing things for others were core to early collectivist civilizations, and that bled to our lives in the present. Care moved through families, neighbors, and friendships as shared responsibility. That way of living isn't perfect, but it sustained so many generations in so many ways. And going back to the whole cultural thing, of course, the individualistic ideologies tend to dominate media, the self-help space, and a lot of therapy discourse. And when you're consuming content that's mostly from that individualistic lens, you start to internalize it. And as someone who grew up in the collective culture, it's hard to ignore Western or individualistic ideologies, even if it quietly contradicts how you're raised. So it's normal to be lost in translation, and it's normal to come to a point where you think this is all you, or that you are enough on your own and that you don't need anyone. There's also a much bigger conversation here about how mental health frameworks travels across cultures, especially in post-colonial contexts. That's a whole conversation on its own. But it's important that we notice how we easily adopt models of healing without asking whether they were ever designed for us in the first place. Aside from the cultural layer, I also want to discuss the era of optimization that we're in. There has been a rise in productivity apps in the past years. Everything became about productivity, efficiency, cutting out anything that doesn't directly serve our goals. And there's so much focus on scheduling everything, time blocking, automating everything, and streamlining everything. And in theory, it should give us more time, more comfort, more freedom. But I think what actually is happening is that all the time we freed up has no more purpose because we have isolated ourselves completely from our communities, making us a lonely generation. When we optimize away all the inefficient parts of life, like what society calls inefficient, for example, like the spontaneous hangouts, the long phone calls, the showing up for people even when it's convenient. Yes, we're left with the perfect calendar, but the consequence of that is the emptiness, the void that we feel now that we've isolated ourselves from everyone. Yes, we have more time, but we're more unfulfilled than ever. And I don't think that's a coincidence because the void we're trying to fill, the loneliness we keep naming as burnout or lack of motivation, isn't something rest or optimization can fix. It's relational and it's the absence of community. So much of what allows us to function, to succeed, to be stable, is built heavily on invisible networks of care, on people who show up quietly, on emotional labor, shared responsibility, or support that doesn't get named or credited. And when those networks weaken, when care becomes invisible, or when we take it for granted, we start to feel like something is missing, but we don't always know how to name it. We try to fill that gap with productivities, with routines, self-improvement, even more independence, acquiring more wealth. But the truth is, that kind of emptiness can only be met through connection. Because no matter how efficient our lives become, we were never meant to carry so much alone. And here's what really bothers me too. I think as a society, we really love to talk about the self-made billionaire, the self-made this, the self-made that. If you think about it, even the wealthiest people had help. They had generational wealth, family money, connections, mentors, luck, and timing. We turn around and apply that same myth to ourselves. We erase our own scaffolding and start telling ourselves that we built all of this alone. Another thing that makes me sad is how these days community activities that bring profit are more valued than community activities that just bring people together. For example, we glorify networking events so much. I'm not saying that it's bad, but the praise is so disproportionate to the praise of unpaid community gatherings like a picnic. We praise building our professional network. We praise going to a conference to make business connections, and it's seen as smart, strategic, and valuable. But the picnic with friends where we bring food, exist together, and just talk, that's suddenly a waste of time. And if you don't go there, it's okay because that's protecting your energy. Why is connection only respected when it's transactional? Why does it only feel worth our time if it leads to money or career advancement, but not simply because it feeds our soul? And that's the sad thing about capitalism. It trains us to measure everything by productivity and profit. And in the process, it starves us of the very thing that makes us human, which is interdependence. It tells us that the only form connection worth having is the kind that advances our individual success. And everything else is inefficient, draining, and a distraction. So those three things are my observations. And if you have any observations on why we have this mindset too, please comment that below. I'd love to understand your perspective on this. So now that we know all of those layers, I want the final part of this video, an application of what you can do with this information on an individual level, on a micro level, and on a macro level. On an individual level, I am not saying that you shouldn't set boundaries. Boundaries are very important as they're guidelines on how you want to be treated by other people. And if someone crosses your boundary, I know the first line of defense would be to disengage and to cut them off. But now that we know this information, we have to sit in the discomfort of communicating how that hurt us and how it affected us so that we can get what we want out of the relationship. If the boundary has been crossed so many times and there's really a point of no return, sure. But if things can be worked out, it is important to practice the skill of communicating your discomfort and also to receive feedback from others because you never know if you hurt them in a way too. That's why they reacted that way. Another way that this can help you on an individual level is that thinking that you owe something to someone, whether big or small, really gives you a sense of purpose or fulfillment. Because I've tried thinking that I can do this all alone and that just kept me so sad. But when I had this immense gratitude for the people who helped me along the way, it also improved my well-being because it satisfied my need for belongingness. And so many psychologists put the need for belongingness as a central theme for self-actualization. Next, an application to this on a micro level is to give your friends or family more grace. It's possible that in the past they had more capacity to offer you their vulnerability, their time, their money, their resources. But our lives are rarely linear. And of course, there are times where we're not at our full capacity. For example, you have a friend that is always late, but there was a time in her life where she was present in all other things and she was on top of all things. It's just that she got stressed and busy, so she cannot carry the same level of energy. So instead of saying that that friend doesn't respect my time, we can have a bit more understanding and think that, oh, that friend, when I was in my darkest times, she was able to show up for me. She was able to pull me out of that dark rut. So why can't I extend the same grace to her when she's being a little late or when she doesn't show up as scheduled? Things like that. And lastly, Lastly, on a macro level, there's a big shift happening right now where there are so many community-focused activities. So it's helpful to trace your purpose and to not join these activities just because they're trending, because you will gain so much from those gatherings. On a macro level, it puts all of these community activities into perspective. The run clubs, the book clubs, the monthly friend meetups, to do activities or to just talk or share interests. It really proves that everyone needs a community that understands them and sees them for who they truly are. And we really can't deny that. It's seen across the world, and that's more than reason enough for me, and I hope for you too, to resist going deeper into the I don't owe anyone anything mindset. Because that mindset breaks our friendships, our families, our communities, and it's leaving us isolated in our perfectly optimized lives, wondering why we still feel so empty. Truly, the most radical thing that we can do right now is to admit that we need help, we need a community, and we can't do this on our own. We have to allow ourselves to be cared for and to show up and to give that care back. Lastly, I just want to leave this video by saying that what keeps me grounded is the simple truth. Every good thing in my life exists because someone cared enough to help me. And the best thing that I can do with that is to care enough to help someone else. So that's it. Let's all come back to each other this 2026. We owe each other more than we think. If you have made it this far, thank you for watching. Till we all bloom together. I will see you in the next video. Bye!